Today I will be presenting on the modal passive, and I'm specifically only going to look at the form, that is how to write passive sentences with modals. Before I start, let me review some rules regarding modals. Okay, first of all, quick lesson about modals is number one, they go before the verb. So he studies English. Okay, we add the modal. He might study English, and the modal goes before the verb. The second rule is that they change the verb into the base form. So she has a car, third person singular, but the moment I add the modal may, then the verb changes from has to the singular have. So it becomes the base form, to the base form of the verb. So have. Next, if you have an auxiliary verb, then they also, once you add a modal, then the modal changes the auxiliary verb into the base form. So he is studying English. Okay, once you add could, he could be studying English. So no longer do we have the auxiliary verb is, but we have the base form of the auxiliary verb be. Okay, moving forward, something you don't want to do when you're using modals, and it's a good thing to review right now, is you don't want to say she might to drive, he may driving, it could drove, he will drives. Instead, you want to say she might drive, he may drive, it could drive, he will drive. Okay, so so that's again reviewing modal rule number 2, change the verb into the base form. Next, and just as important, don't make these mistakes as well with tense. So he may is driving, it could has driven. We don't want to do that. Remember that you want to use the base form of the auxiliary verb. So he may be driving instead of is driving, and it could have driven instead of has driven. And that is modal rule number 3. We want to change the auxiliary into the base form. Now, there are about 9 modal words: can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, and must, plus some phrasal modals. And many modals have different usages. So there's modals of obligation, suggestion, possibility, ability, permission, prohibition, necessity, and past habits. We're not going to be looking at any specific ones today, but just know that they have different usages. So let's look now at modal passives. But before we start, again, let's review passive rules. Remember these rules. This object of an active sentence takes a subject position. The agent is not necessary. If the agent is present, it follows a by phrase. So it's in a by phrase, so by plus agent. Change the verb into the be plus participle, and remember the be auxiliary gets the tense. So let's look now. Let's look at modal passives, and let's look at the form of modal passives. So the ball is kicked. Okay, if I want to add a modal, there are 2 rules I need to keep in mind. Modal rule number 2, we need to change the verb into the base form. And modal rule number 5, the be auxiliary gets the tense. So what do we got? What is the passive rule? Okay, so here we go. Might, the ball might is kicked by the boy. Well, that's wrong. We need to change the auxiliary, not to change the verb, but the auxiliary into the base form. So the ball might be kicked by the boy. Okay, this is what we have to change the verb into the base form. So might be kicked by the boy. Change the verb into the base form. Moving on. Here is another passive rule. We're going to be looking at present perfect passives. So Latin has been spoken for many years. Has been. Okay, let's see how adding modal affects has been spoken. So first, again, keep in mind that modal rule number 3 for present perfect is that we need to change the auxiliary into the base form when you add a modal. So what if we add a modal? Might. Latin might has been spoken for many years. Well, that's wrong. We need to change this auxiliary into the base form. So change the verb into the base form. Have. Latin might have been spoken for many years. Okay. To quickly summarize and recap the 2 important rules about writing a modal passive. Modal rule number 2, change the verb into the base form. So the boy might kick the ball. The ball might be kicked by the boy. And modal rule number 3, change the auxiliary into the base form. This rule is specifically applied to the present perfect passive. So he might have stolen the painting. the painting might have been stolen. This concludes this presentation. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts, questions, or concerns, please email me, and I look forward to seeing you in class.